Today we're talking to somebody who needs little or no introduction. He's the creative force behind Willis, Faber & Dumas, Sainsbury's Centre, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, more recently Bloomsburg in the city and the Apple HQ at Cupertino in California. Today we're talking to Norman Foster.
For me, collaboration is at the heart of the creative process. A lot of people think that if you collaborate, you're somehow diluting, it's moving towards a sort of committee way of making decisions. For me, nothing could be further from the truth. As a designer, I need information. I need to know the consequences of a decision in one part of the design, the knock-on effect on it. So if it's a building, the way that the building stands up, how it breathes, how it keeps cool or warm, what it looks like, its energy efficiency, whether it's beautiful, whether it's ugly, all of these things interact. So I believe passionately in multidisciplinary working. It's about knowledge. And that for me is the most powerful generator of a design. It's the concept of the round table, which is non-hierarchical. So, and it's creating the atmosphere where everybody can participate and where you can have enough confidence that there isn't a fear of failure, that you encourage the exploration of a design direction which may prove to be a cul-de-sac. Design is not in that sense a linear sequence. Sometimes you do go in directions and you have to reverse back, but along the way you gain knowledge which makes it easier to make those final design decisions. A school of architecture typically will encourage the class of architects to believe that they can design in glorious isolation. And it didn't get more extreme than Yale School of Architecture, where I did a master's course, and Paul Rudolph did not believe in collaboration. For him, there was only one person, it was the architect. And I remember one project for an office building, and around me, everybody's drawing office buildings because everybody knows what a tall building is. It's a central core with elevators, structure, mechanical plant, the toilets, with a perimeter space around it. I wanted to understand how a tall building would stand up. I didn't want to assume that it would be the stuff that I could find out of a book, notwithstanding the fact that every office building up to that point had a central core. So I approached Rudolph and I said, I need a structural engineer. Before I can draw a line, I need to understand more about a tall building. And to his credit, he found one, and we sat down together. And the building that came out of that was subsequently described by Bob Stern at the inauguration of the Art and Architecture building. And he said Norman created the Hong Kong Bank here as a graduate student. And recognizably, you can see the roots in that building. And that was the first high-rise building without a central core. And that was the Hong Kong Bank. It fragments the cores. And for the first time, you have a space which is not interrupted by a central core, which enabled the Hong Kong Bank to have a dealer's floor. Now, I didn't feel compromised as a designer by collaborating with that engineer right at the beginning. On the contrary, I felt far more confident creatively as a designer because I had more knowledge and I tested the idea of a tall building for the first time without a central core. Yale was a kind of proving ground in all kinds of ways. It brought Richard and I together. We collaborated on projects. Again, that was very, very unusual. I think it was the first time ever happened in the School of Architecture. And that carried on and became Team 4 back here in London, brought together Wendy, my late wife, and her sister, Georgie, who provided the legal means by which we were able to call ourselves architects at the time. Buckminster Fuller, Bucky, as he's affectionately known by so many of us, It was his project for an underground theatre at St Peter's College, Oxford, that brought us together with Samuel Beckett and various kind of theatrical figures of that period. I think we came together because of a shared interest in sustainability in green architecture, although the term green architecture hadn't been invented then, but in different ways. And Bucky, I mean, heroically and, you know, extraordinary figure. So I was fortunate, really, to be able to collaborate with him for the last 12 years of his life, and that was truly inspirational. And I think that we are all the subject of influences. Sometimes they're manifest, they're obvious, other times they're much more subliminal. They're not so much in your field of vision, more subconscious. But if I try to be analytical, I think I can see the connections back to the collaboration with Bucky. And Bucky would gain, in his own way, although he was a kind of solitary voice, he really did manage to extract from the aircraft industry, from scientists, from close colleagues around him, from artists like Isamu Noguchi. So he's very much into that mainstream of collaboration. Working with Mike Bloomberg, for example, on his project here in the City of London, next to Mansion House, Bank of England, and so on. That collaboration, that creative process, owes a huge amount to Mike's personal involvement. And the fact that he didn't delegate that, so you would get that from the source, that was really important. And we were talking about the relationship between somebody who's very central to the design and the architect and the teams around and the larger total team. And I was commenting that it was very unusual that you had somebody who was at the center of an organization and was, in that sense, so hands-on, down to the detail. And we talked at some length. I made the point that really having access to him and hearing firsthand, in addition to all the other research and individuals involved in the project, that was formative in terms of its influence. And the space that we were inhabiting, right down to the detail of the furniture around us, had evolved out of that, I suppose, collaboration. I didn't use that word, but that word is something that, you know, we've been exchanging between us. It's common knowledge that I got a phone call from Steve Jobs saying he needed some help and how quickly could I get out there. And I was out there very quickly, and what was going to be a meeting of 1-2 hours turned out to be a whole day. And that day was a total immersion, really, in how Steve saw the project. And we visited the site together. We went around Apple, their current facility in Cupertino, ended up at Pixar because that, although it was very different, had some lessons, and finished very late that night in his kitchen. And if I take extracts from that conversation and put them down, you know, as headlines, you can see the links right back to the project 8 years later, because this was 2009. He's talking about Stone and Glass, talking about the landscape of his youth, which was the Fruit Bowl. And of course, through an extraordinary level of cooperation, collaboration, the design was established. Steve presented it to the town council in Cupertino. It's totally the same design. Support from Tim Cook, Johnny Ive and his studio, and we've all worked together. So it's really an exercise in a very large team, colleagues, and really everybody pooling all their creative energy in terms of the quest for the most creative environment for Apple. There is almost a seamless link from this conversation about collaboration and the foundation, which at its heart is the importance of interdisciplinary thinking and collaboration, and how that is central not just to the design of a building, but the major issues of the environment through to climate change, energy, and really addressing younger generations of those involved with the environment, with the city. They can be engineers, they can be managers, they can be politicians, obviously the design professions, architects and engineers, but breaking down the barriers. And in that sense, our launch event, which was this one-day series of roundtables, of presentations, of discussions, exchanges, in front of a largely 2,000, largely very, very young student audience, had a total mixture of individuals from different backgrounds. You had Mike Bloomberg, ex-mayor, you had civic leaders, scientists, artists, those concerned in academia, Ricky Burdett, MIT, a complete cross-section. And so we could see before us the benefits of that approach. And so that, I think, in terms of its longer-term legacy, is about an educational program, is about bringing the best students from different fields of activity, exposing them to the most powerful individuals, the most knowledgeable individuals, in terms of anticipating the future, anticipating change. It obviously should be inspirational in terms of the way that it brings together and demonstrates the potential for addressing these issues in a positive, optimistic way, and through projects to address anything from a civic intervention in a city in terms of public space, or greater access to cleaner forms of transport, or looking at the way that we can use energy more efficiently, how we can transform rural communities and raise the standard of living, access to light, power for cooking or whatever. So across a fairly wide spectrum. It's interesting. You ask, what gives me the greatest pleasure in terms of collaboration? Is it other architects? Is it engineers? The answer is very simple. It's not about the background of that individual. It's really about attitude, contribution, and in a way the forum demonstrated that. You had some of the most significant contributions coming from a politician, an artist, a teacher, a practicing architect or engineer, a researcher in a media lab at MIT. In the end, it's all about the individual.